Hi, this is Dino. And, I woke up this morning and I wanted to talk about ResponseCache, the ResponseCache policy. So let's have a look at the behavior of that policy. First thing I'm going to do is look at a WSDL SOAP service. So we use this for just for the purposes of the example. So I've got an example SOAP service running, and as you can see, nothing really exotic. It's got a bunch of different methods on this, and what I want to do is build a SOAP to REST proxy using that as the back end. So what I'll do is I'll grab that the URL of the service, and I'll go into Apigee Edge in the administrative portal, click on the Add API Proxy, select SOAP Service, and we'll walk through this. So we've got a URL, we'll validate that. That looks good. I'm going to call this library one, not bother with the description. And you can see that I've got a couple of options here. I can build a REST to SOAP proxy or just pass it through. REST to SOAP means that the interface being exposed by the proxy will be REST-like. It'll use HTTP GET verbs in cases where it's appropriate, and the payloads will be carried in the URL parameters or perhaps in URL path elements. Whereas pass-through SOAP just means, well, you're going to present the same SOAP to the Apigee Edge endpoint as you would to the eventual backend service. Why would you want to do that one? Well, the reason you'd want to do that is to be able to collect analytics on a SOAP service and perhaps also do centralized key verification and token management through Apigee Edge. But today I want to do REST to SOAP, so we'll just select that. And for now, I'm not actually going to apply any security because that's not really what I want to talk about. And I don't actually want to deploy it. It's not even necessary for me to deploy it in this case. So I built the proxy, and Apigee Edge has this really nice wizard that will build the REST interface, and I've already done that. Let's walk through the API proxy editor, and you can see in this proxy now I've got a different verb and resource pair for each one of the operations that was in that SOAP interface. And most of them are gets because we're doing read things, and Apigee inferred that this one was this particular SOAP operation was a post, and it carries a big payload. So next thing I want to do with the SOAP service is add caching. So let's add in ResponseCache, and this is really easy in Apigee Edge. I just click the add step, select ResponseCache, and add that in, and you can see the new ResponseCache policy appears, and it's set right here in the preflow, which means it's going to apply to every request that comes in to this service. But let's just think about what this means now. And maybe we'll have a look in at the operations of this ResponseCache policy. So we can see the cache key is something that is configurable by the API provider, by me. And by default, when you drag and drop a ResponseCache policy into the proxy editor in Apigee Edge, you get a key that uses the request URI, and only the request URI for the cache. Interesting choice there, and you should understand the implications there. And that is, if you've got different verbs coming in on the same URI path, you are going to get the same cache result. Okay, let me say that again. If you've got a get on a URI, let's say /books, and you've also got a post on a URI like /books, you're going to be using the same ResponseCache element, the same element in the ResponseCache to satisfy that request. That's probably not what you want. So you got to be thoughtful about this. The default configuration of the ResponseCache policy may not be what you want. Beyond that, the HTTP spec actually says really you should only be caching gets and head requests. That is to say, HTTP requests that use the verb get or head. A lot of people don't know the head verb, but it's out there and it's valid. So suppose we wanted to enforce that restriction. You can see in the response cache policy configuration, you've got a couple of elements here that say that direct the response cache policy to skip cache lookup and cache population with certain when certain conditions apply. And in this case, we never skip lookup and we never skip population of the cache. But with a little bit of intelligence, we can add in different conditions. And what I've just done is pasted in a condition that says, look, I want to skip the cache lookup if the verb is not get and head. And certainly if I'm not looking up the cache, if the verb is not that, I certainly don't want to populate the cache if the verb is not get and head. And so by dropping these in, now I'm getting a response cache policy that will not run for post requests. And that is probably what you want in your scenario. Perhaps not always, but probably. The summary here is that you should be thoughtful about how you configure the response cache policy in Apigee Edge. The default configuration is not always what you want. All right, that's it.